what is more important about this brain area LOTV is that show us a new principle of organization of the brain, because usually we think about the brain as divided to the senses, and what is important is the input, what comes from the eyes, from the ears, but actually what we show is what is processing the brain is even more important than the input. And what this brain area is doing is creating a 3D model of the environment, given any input from any sense. So this is one thing we did. We also discovered several new maps of the body in the brain, and now we study the link between the body and the mind, the body and the soul, and how, when you have emotional problems, how you can feel them in your body, and on the other hand, how can you help your emotion state by focusing on the body, like doing a body scan or things like this. We also study a lot how the brain develops in the first years of life, which is a period called critical period, which is the brain is most plastic. And the main discovery in this field by Yubel and Wiesel, two people that won the Nobel Prize for their amazing work on recording the visual system, recording activity, neural activity, the first. They also coined this term of critical periods and contributed to them. And what it says, that if you did not receive input in the first several weeks or maybe months of life, you will, for example, you didn't receive the visual input because of some problem. For example, let's say you had cataract that prevented you to see. We all know that cataract is from late age,
yes,
but there is also congenital cataract. So people born with cataract. And we know that the brain is very plastic in the first weeks and months, and that's, we agree. But so if you remove it very quickly, the babies could see. But the critical period concept said that you would never, if you didn't do it quick enough, and you didn't receive visual input, for example, in the first weeks or months, you will never be able to develop vision. You will never be able to develop the specializations of the areas in the brain. For example, there is area that is processing faces. So you will never be able to see faces or to have this area, the beautiful face area, and so on and so forth. And what we discovered working with blind people is that this is not true. That you can recover vision even if you had 10 or 20 years, you were completely blind and you were born blind. And also if you had cataracts and you remove them, there is now several labs in the world that corroborate this theory that we put forward more than a decade and a half ago. You would be able to see after. So initially, some things you recover immediately, some things you will need really to work very hard and use rehab and use technology, but it's possible. And what is really interesting about this is that part of how we discovered this was to develop new technologies. And we developed this technology for two purposes. One, to study the brain, to test this theory and to test these ideas. And the second was to help blind people. So, and to progress this field of technology a bit further. So to give you one example, we developed an algorithm called the iMusic. And the idea is the following. You know how ultrasound works, for example. So ultrasound uses, by the way, the three senses, okay, in principle. One, it has a moving element, a rotating element. A piezoelectric, it rotates, so it's similar to the touch system, yeah? And it moves the air in very high frequency. This movement of the air creates sound waves, but they are with such high energy that we cannot hear them. It's above 20 kilohertz. So we cannot hear them, but it's sound waves for any purpose. These sound waves travel into the belly, and then technology translates them into a picture, into an image, right? And so it's all built, this image, all the information that in the image comes from the sounds. Yeah, of course. And they penetrate the belly. If there is a baby there, it's one sound. If there is no baby, it's a different sound. If it's a boy, it's one sound, because the shape is different. Yes, if it's a girl, a different sound.
The sound depends on the shape.
Exactly. So we said, hey, why don't we create a technology that, especially for a blindness that is uncurable, that mimic this. So what we did, we took a camera, very cheap, simple camera, put it on glasses, just like this, and we created an algorithm that used three very simple rules. So of course it's algorithm, so I won't get into all the details, but it uses not very complex rules. Music, the timbre of the music, the height of the music, the relation between the two ears give you the location and the time. The height give you where it is, and the timbre. And the idea is the same, that we embed every image online, a video feed, in sounds, and we train the blind to learn this new language. And what is amazing is that after 10 to 40 hours of learning this new language, so it's a bit like if I will try to learn Spanish here, yeah, of course, then they've been able to do quite amazing things. One of them, for example, if you now smile, I listen to the sounds that come from the camera, it translates them into a lot of sound, just like in ultrasound, and the blind managed to say, "Oh, you are surprised now. Oh, you are smiling now."
Yes,
or go to pick his shoes.
Because you're using music to see.
Exactly. Just like bats and dolphins, and just like ultrasound.
Exactly.
Okay?
That's
and
amazing.
the amazing thing is that we also discovered using this and other things is that actually even now, when I'm looking at you, I'm imagining the 3D environment. I don't get any 3D input. Our eyes are 2D, okay? And if you close your eyes and move the one eye and blink, and do it close and far, when it's close, it jumps more or less, the image? More, exactly. This is how the brain knows what is close, what is far, okay? This is how 3D movie also works, of course. And this is how we create 3D of the world. There is no 3D input. The input is all 2D. It's like a screen. The brain hallucinates, generates with it. So we interface with this. This is what we showed. We interface with it. And what is amazing, we showed that if we train the blind, we scan their brain before they learn the language, there is very little activity for these sounds because they are meaningless. But after they learn to use them, and they process only in the sound system, which is here. And after they learn, suddenly their visual system, although it never saw one day in their life, starts to work. So it's completely against what you said about the critical periods. So this is the new theory, and there is more and more support into this theory. We now use this concept of using the other senses also for other things. So for example, in our recent work, we showed that if we take the biggest sensory problem in the world is hearing impaired. You lose your hearing. Above 65, more than a third will have it. Okay? But it's not just older people, also young people, because they are much more exposed to noise. And now we know that people that have hearing impaired and they don't treat it well enough and they start to disconnect from society, they would have much bigger chances to develop neurodegenerative disease. So your chances, for example, to develop dementia is really increased. Right. So it's really two problems. It's the biggest sensory problem in the world, but it's also might create your brain to decline.
The neurological problem.
Yeah, so we thought maybe we can develop something super cheap that will help you to understand speech better. And what we did, we took speech, and the thing that that people with hearing impaired, have the biggest difficulty is to listen to speech while there is other sounds in the environment. For example, right now there is this water.
Yes, running.
So if they try to listen with hearing impaired, with cochlear implant, with hearing aid, in a quiet room, when you test them in the lab, they hear perfect. Suddenly now there is a bit music. The water is rolling. Maybe somebody would call on the phone to talk, and suddenly they drop to almost zero.
Of course, because they hear all the inputs greater.
Exactly, and
They cannot
because
differentiate.
also because the brain find it very difficult to deal with this. There is many reasons. So we did something very simple. We created a little device that goes on your fingertip. Yeah, it's still in the lab. It's still a prototype, and we added some. We haven't created an algorithm that takes some parts of the speech and use this to vibrate on the finger together when you listen to the speech. And we managed to show that with, first of all, immediately you get about 5 decibels of improvement, and after 1 hour of training, you most of the people uh, manage to double, like so to have like 10 dB improvement of the speech noise, and this corresponds to increasing the volume without increasing it. So the idea is that you increase the speech volume
That's amazing.
into just because you added some algorithm, something that vibrates on your finger that corresponds to some features of the speech. So this is another thing that we develop now to try to bring it into people with hearing aid, with cochlear implant, and so on and so forth. And the last thing is that we are now thinking how, and we have several projects in the lab, how to reprogram sounds in a smart way, not in a simple way, just to listen to water, flicker, and to create relaxation and anxiety. Because we found out that there is another huge program that is not sensory, it's more emotional in the world right now, is anxiety, depression, stress. It's huge now in the world. There is a world epidemic, and we try to think what can we do to help also this. So my idea is that we develop technology in order to study the brain, which is amazing. For me, it's the new frontier. It's the new era. It's the new thing that we have. I think it's the most exciting thing that the scientists could do these days.
Yes.
And,
And in history.
yeah, and at the same time, we believe we get another reward besides being so interested and enjoying the discoveries of the brain and mapping the brain and imaging the brain and understanding organization principle and flexibility principles. This is the main thing as I do as a basic scientist at the IDC, Interdisciplinary Center Herzliya,
Claro.
where I have my lab. And on the other hand, we can try and use this technology to develop new technology to help the world, and also in all the things that are really problematic, hearing impaired, vision impaired, emotional impairment. And also we want to inspire other people. So we try to publish in open source everything we discover. We publish so everyone can enter our lab, our lab
Research.
page. For example, Amedi Lab. Yeah, go you type in Google Amedi Lab, enter there, and you can download all the papers for free. You don't need to pay. It used to be that you need to pay, hundreds of dollars. So a person that want to be inspired could not use it.
No.
So we believe that we should have all of our papers and all of our discoveries made accessible to the public for free. So you can. So yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you
What
so
about
much.
dementia?
So we don't study dementia per se, but we do several things in this respect. So first of all, no one lab in the world, and I work with amazing scientists that come from all over the world. I have people coming from the US and MIT. I have people coming from Italy, from the Italian Institute of Technology, from Poland. So in a way, from Montreal, there is actually several people that decided to move to Israel after that, and now have their own lab. They become professors, and so it's very exciting for me. So no one lab, even working with all these amazing individuals, can deal with all the topics. But one thing we do, or two things that we do in relation to dementia, is one, is we try to develop these very cheap technologies that will improve the situation of hearing impaired, and that was shown to have a big correlation into giving some immunity to dementia, or delaying it, or reducing the risk of getting it. So that's one thing. Take care of your hearing and repair it and continue to interact and continue to grow. The second thing we do with the dementia is study flexibility and plasticity in the brain. And here we have a very clear message that if you challenge yourself by learning this new, language for the blind, or this new language that transform vision to speech, but it doesn't have to be this. If you go and study a new language, you learn to study a new dance, you go to have a new sport, you all the time need to challenge your brain in any age. And you can choose whatever, as long as it's relatively new and challenging, and you can do it for a year at least, and then you can switch a topic, or then you develop immunity for dementia in average for about 3 to 4 years. Immunity, it will delay or prevent it for several years, reduce your risk. So that's the second thing we do. The last thing we do in relation to this is that we, as part of the lab, we are a brain imaging lab and have a new MRI center at the IDC. We try to develop new methods that would tell you that you are in a risk to develop dementia by your brain imaging, by your MRI scans. And then, first of all, maybe there would be some drugs that are we know that in many cases, in many diseases, drugs are very effective in the first stages, but as the disease go, like cancer, and when it's more and more developed, it's less and less effective. So developing these diagnostics would help, and I know there is many labs in the world that are now working, really many imaging labs in the world that participate in this effort to develop better diagnostics. I think the clinical world, we have this amazing MRI and brain imaging technologies, and we developed a lot in this field in the last decade. And unfortunately, besides 1 or 2 cases of before brain surgery for epilepsy and things like this, the clinical world don't use all these new methods. There is some gap between the basic science and basic research, like my world, and the medicine world, and we see ourselves as one of the labs that will help to bridge this gap and bring these technologies into. So we develop some computational analysis and methods, and we collaborate with other labs like Professor Yaniv Asaf lab from Tel Aviv, which developed new method to study the anatomy and the connectivity and plasticity. So there is a huge effort now in the world to not only to move forward these technologies, but also to bring them and to bridge the gap with the radiologists, with the people that look on this, with units that will use these insights to help patients to diagnose and to treat. So this is the sort of things we do.
You talked about conscience.
We talked about
Consciousness.
yeah.
Consciousness.
Yeah.
And what are your developments on this? Because we have heard that the consciousness is in the brain.
Of course, the consciousness is only in the brain.
But we haven't heard like any advances on this.
So there is advances in this field. I can tell you one thing we do about consciousness. But there is researchers in the world, like for example, one of my collaborators, Professor Stanislas Yan, is one of the world experts in studying consciousness. And he has a theory about a global network that you process all this information in all the brain is important for consciousness. So you need to process the things in the networks they are done, but there is some global network that is accessed there. We do one project, he by the way won the Brain Prize, which is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in brain science. And one thing we do in relation to studying consciousness is that we realize that this sonification method we developed, this eye music, which by the way enable both late blind and also people that were born with blind to recognize colors, which is crazy. They never saw colors, but they managed to say this is a blue cap, this is a red, and this is the white table, and so on and so forth. So what we do with this is, because we notice something really, really interesting with this. So this sonification, we also develop some touch interface that give them the information also by vibrating of the body. So it's a combination of sound and touch to replace vision. Okay? So what we noticed is that in the first couple of hours, let's say up to 5 or 10 hours, they get the sounds and vibrations and they manage to understand something. So for example, if we draw to them a smile, it would be something like if it's a sad face, it will be and if it's in different face, it will be a line. So they understand, for example, the facial expression or the letters of the alphabet. We, by the way, have a congenitally blind lady that Hamutal that was born blind, but she has a sighted kid. And when her kid was 5, when we started working with her, and one day she asked us, I know how to read Braille, but I want to teach my daughter the Hebrew alphabet before she goes to school and the English alphabet. Can you teach me this? And in less than 10 hours, we managed to teach her all the alphabet, and she managed to read any word using this.
Not in Braille.
Not in Braille, in regular Hebrew and English alphabet, and she was able to teach her daughter using this sonification method.
Amazing.
But back to consciousness, what is really interesting is that in the first 10 hours, so they understand what's going there in the world, but they feel it as touch and sound. There is a phenomena that is called visceral attribution. What do I mean? Is that now they understand that the information is not coming from the ears or the body. It's coming from the objects that the camera capture in the outside world. The consciousness go to this object and experience it at the bottom, and they can go and pick it up. They can even pick up a red apple from green apple and things like this. Okay?
Even colors.
Even colors, yeah. Now, for people so that's already a conscious feeling that now we want to try and capture this inside the MRI scanner. So we can see what happened in the brain in this moment that they switch from touch and sound to this visceral attribution of vision in the outside world. So we can actually have an amazing model to study their conscious experience. The input all the time is the same. It's just what the consciousness feel about it. And then the last case was a really fascinating case that made us realize that we have an amazing model to study consciousness. Is a person, Herzl, that he was the first person to receive a brain implant. It's an implant, a retinal implant. It's implant that give you about 60 pixels, so it's very low resolution vision. But the amazing thing is that when you turn it on, immediately you see light. So he was blind for over a decade, so he didn't see it. He used to see, yeah. He lost his vision, and he got the surgery and it's a very expensive device, costs more than $100,000, and that's without the rehab and everything, just the device itself and the surgery. He managed to see light immediately, so this was amazing. After we didn't see light, imagine that you're in the dark for 10 years and suddenly you see light. It's amazing. The problem was that with 60 pixels you cannot do a lot, right? So he contacted us and asked us to study the eye music, which give you resolution that is enough to see faces, for example. Okay, so it's thousands of pixels rather than 60. And he studied it. And it was very interesting because this guy was a very impressive person. He's a writer and also a musician, so he could express himself very well. And he told us, I get this feeling that my brain is waking up. We didn't tell him anything about it, and I have this feeling that things starts to come from the outside world. But after 30 hours, 40 hours of training, he started to tell us, when I'm picking up this bottle and looking at it, suddenly I have an hallucination. I see the image actually of the bottle that was, I didn't see it for many, many years. I start to have sometimes this hallucination, but of the things that are really in the world, that I'm looking at them or touching them. And this is amazing because his visual consciousness completely restored and not completely restored, but he suddenly started to awaken, it started to appear. And again, we really want to study this these times that he experienced this visual hallucination, although he still cannot see and see using sounds and using this eye music method. So yeah, so basically this is what we
macular degeneration.
It doesn't. The beauty of our method is that it doesn't matter what is the reason. Okay, for you to lose your vision. Okay, it will help to anyone that
You're going beyond the
but
eyes.
exactly, it doesn't matter if you are a problem in the eye, in the brain, in the core. But if you're in the early stage of macular degeneration, you probably still have many more pixels that we can provide you with the sound. So there is no reason to use it when you have a mild to moderate visual impairment. When it's really becoming terrible that you cannot recognize faces anymore or you cannot read anymore, then our method can help you. With hearing impaired, what we develop and work on, any hearing impaired can benefit from it. Even people like us, we showed in our papers that even a person that his hearing is perfect, but he tried to understand speech in noise in a language that he was not learning when he was young, it helps him a lot. So even when you try to understand me now in English, and let's say it's not your mother tongue, if you would have this little thing on your finger, it doesn't have to be finger. Finger is just, the pinky is very sensitive and it's have a lot of, but it might work also in other places. For now we study it only in the fingers. Then you would be able to understand speech in regular, no problem. But if it would be speech in noise, another person would speak here, or all these examples, you would benefit from it with the same 5 to 10 decibels of improvement of speech in noise.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you fall in love with the brain?
It's actually a very personal and funny question for me. I think I never said it in an interview. I wanted to be a marine biologist and a jazz musician, so I studied both of them.
Jazz musician.
Yeah, I was a jazz musician at the High Music Academy that happened to be in the same campus as where I learned my marine biology. And in the first year, before the first year and second year, I went to travel in abroad, and I took a very cheap charter flight, and my flight got one day earlier. I was very sad that my vacation shortened, but I said, okay, I will go to the university and pay the administration and register for the courses. And I see this girl that I had a little crush on, and she said, "Are you coming to this new experimental brain program?" And I told her, "No, I want to be a marine biologist." But since I had a crush on her, I said, "Okay." And she said, "What do you care? It's voluntarily, and they take the best students. I know you have good grades, so come and listen to a couple of courses. We go together, and maybe you like it, maybe you don't. What do you have to lose?" I said, okay. I went there, I made an interview and told the interviewer, I'm really, although it was just because I had a little crush on her. And after 2 weeks in this experimental program, I quitted the marine biology and knew this is my, it was so fascinating. Everything I learned was so amazing, so fascinating that was it, that I knew this is what I'm going to do with my life. The music I liked so much that I continued for another 3-4 years. I had a lot of passion. Unfortunately, the audience didn't feel the same. They thought I was there, okay, so. So then it took me another 3 years, but when I started my direct PhD in computational neuroscience, I decided also to quit the science and focus on this and do what I am doing. But the funny thing is that it took me about 5 to 6 years that I was a researcher, but I didn't study and integrate music. This is my other love, my other passion. I don't want to mix it with my profession, But once I started with this project, with the creating, I was like, am I crazy? This is the most amazing topic in the world, Why wouldn't I want to combine also music in my research? And now we combine it for this hearing impaired project. We combine it for reducing anxiety and stress, maybe even depression, with some very new ways to do it, and so on and so forth. So it's fun.
¿Quieres preguntar algo más?
And I'm here as a guest of two amazing organizations. One is, it's very important to give them credit because they are amazing. I'm representing IDC, the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya, which is my
We
university.
know, I think we interviewed here the head...
Professor Reichmann,
the
president?
No, the director.
Director, yeah.
Yes.
Cool. And
Jonathan
Davis.
Jonathan Davis.
Yeah. And the organization that brought me here are two. One is the Genius 100, which is a network of 100 visionaries that try to come together once a year and make projects to help humanity in a lot of topics, from the environment to medicine to technology to humanitarian efforts. And the second organization is Ilan, which is with the president Isaac Asa, that invited me to come to Mexico City and say it will be nice to meet some people here and do some things. So I want to thank them for bringing me here and exposing the amazing Latin America experience for me.
Are you doing any projects with Mexico?
We are following this meeting. We are starting some project with Mexican entities. Yes.
With
So I hope
universities?
it's still in the very early stages. Maybe in the next visit, the next interview, I will be able to say more about it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because you talk about how art can affect neuroscience.
In a way.
How about love? How can love reshape our brains?
That's a very, very deep and interesting questions. Unfortunately, I didn't study, love per se, maybe yet. But I'm collaborating with another professor at IDC, Professor Ruth Feldman, and she is one of the first to study oxytocin, which is the hormone of love. So, for example, when you hug someone, more than 15 seconds, you start to secrete this hormone that have a lot of good effect on your body. So what we do now is to try to see what type of sensory and experiences, we create experiences in virtual reality, in augmented reality, in normal sensory technologies, would help you to reduce the level of cortisol, of the stress hormone, and increase the levels of the love hormone, of oxytocin, and be able to improve your health and your immune system and all this. So that's my very little contribution and project that we study these days. Still didn't publish a lot on this.